Boy, oh boy, I want to bring in now someone else who can discuss this and other things that's happening. She has a fascinating new book out, an award winning journalist, best selling author, constitutional commentator, attorney, professor, founder and CEO of the Redefining Freedom Center of Virginia, a friend, former colleague, Sophia Nelson. Hi, Sophia. How you doing?
Hey Don, how are you?
I'm doing okay. As you were, thank you for joining us. As you were listening to these two gentlemen, and I know you've been there, you've been in the fight. What goes through your mind?
Well, listen, I think that Tennessee and Louisiana have different challenges as they outlined, but the question is after what has happened with the Supreme Court's latest decision on voting rights, where they gutted it, you're already seeing the fallout. And the question really becomes, I live in Virginia, so we're the upper South, as I like to say, and we are very blue here. And as you saw yesterday, the FBI raided Senator Louise Lucas's office in Virginia, the
Yeah.
Senate Majority Leader here, and I imagine there are going to be some trumped up charges on her, no pun intended. And I think that what you're going to see is this movement by the federal government in the South to try to deconstruct, as I like to call it, the efforts of post Reconstruction into the civil rights era. So I think we have a crisis that's been brewing for about a decade. And I think it's coming to a head. And Project 2025, Don, is here and it's being implemented piece by piece, and I'm concerned that I don't see the resistance that of our parents and grandparents generation that I feel like we should be having right now.
Why is that? And by the way, the book, let's just put this up. The book is called Redefining Freedom, Frequently Asked Questions. That you have. And on the frequently asked questions, I think that should be one of them for the book is why aren't we seeing that sort of galvanization and motivation from people as we did back during the civil rights movement?
2 points. The inspiration for the book for me is a quote by Coretta Scott King. And what she said in essence is this: freedom is never a static thing. It has to be won again and again in every generation. And that is a very important thing to put a pin in, because if you go back to the civil rights movement, the Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act of 65, and then you look at that 50-year span or 60-year span in there, you can see a decline in that fight for freedom in our community. What do I mean by that? You saw Reverend Jackson and his running for the presidency. You had Shirley Chisholm before him, et cetera, et cetera. But we got more and more, what's the word I'm looking for? We became corporate Black folks. We became integrated. We became
Comfortable.
assimilated, right? And we became part of this quote unquote color blindness that really bothers me. And we can talk about that in a bit, because color blindness just doesn't exist. And it's as, one of the justices said in the Supreme Court, I think it was the Bakke versus Regents case, you know, color consciousness must come before you can be colorblind. In other words, you've got to be able to see race and understand racial history and how it plays a big role in America and her present state before you can get to color blindness. So I think that the reason you're not seeing this pushback from the NACP and other organizations that have traditionally been on the front lines is because we've gotten comfortable. Which brings me to the second point, which is, Don, democracy does not sustain itself. It requires participation, active participation. 50% of our country doesn't vote in every election. 50% doesn't participate. And when you get down to state elections and local elections, that number drops a lot. Sometimes it's 30%, sometimes it's 40%. So people are disengaged. And what has happened is this has allowed the what you would call populist movement of Trump, right? And people like him to be able to get elected with those very small numbers that are not, not the popular vote. He did win it this last time, but that isn't something Republicans have traditionally done well with in the last number of elections. And so they tend to win in these smaller southern regional areas where the populations are overwhelmingly Caucasian, and they can kind of win with just that vote. They don't need a diverse majority, if you will. They can win with just a slimmer minority.
What is the book about? Those are, I just want to, because these are these, you said these are the frequently asked questions that you're asked. What is the book about? Why is it important at this time? Why
So,
read this book?
so two
I
things.
want to know
One,
that.
America 250 is coming July 4th, 2026. And I don't want to be another person who just says, let's celebrate, let's do kumbaya, let's pretend everything is good. Everything is not good, and everything is not all bad either. And I think that's really important that we settle down into that and understand that there are things that have worked well. You and I are sitting here talking right now. We are the remnants. We're Gen Xers. I'm assuming we're age cohorts, right? So we're Gen Xers, and we are the heirs of that civil rights movement, right? But
But
what
Sophia, let me just jump in. I understand what you're saying. Look, and I'm as optimistic as the next person, but everything does feel pretty bad right now
I was
for
going to get
me.
to that.
Okay, I'll let you go.
I
You're the
always
guest. Go
want to
ahead.
be I always want to be somebody that says there's a path forward, and there is.
Okay.
But what I'm saying in this book is you've got to understand how we got here. And we got here, you got to go back 10 years, Don, and you've got to go back to the post-Obama era and the Tea Party, and the Tea Party begets Trump and MAGA, and then this is how you end up here. This country apparently did not weather the fact very well that we had an African American president for 8 years who was scandal free, who didn't get into any messes financially or in his personal life or otherwise, who did a pretty good job running the country, pulling it out of a crisis when he came into office. And somehow, with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the advancements of women and people of color, somehow that dream that Dr. King talked about in 1963 that came to fruition really angered a lot of our fellow citizens who were not people of color. And they began to feel victimized, and they began to feel like there was too much woke and too much CRT and all their little buzzwords. And what Donald Trump did very effectively was he tapped into that discontent, that anger, that worry that the country's browning, that there are too many illegal immigrants in the country, and that they're taking something of my America. And so it's a remnant, as Representative Jones said very right, that we've seen this movie before, Don. This is Woodrow Wilson Redux meets Andrew Johnson Redux, and we can go back and back. And so we're just in another cycle of this racial pushback. And I know that a lot of our
But
white,
there's a difference now. There's a difference now.
which
The
is
difference now is that the people who are in charge don't give a damn about the Constitution or the rules or
absolutely right.
the law or anything. They don't care that they are using laws that were put into effect that is supposed to protect minorities and people in the underserved communities, and they're using those same laws to discriminate and to violate and to criminalize people of color and people in underserved
Don,
communities.
that can only work. That can only work when the guardrails that have been put in our Constitution, the Supreme Court and the Congress, are a check on a rogue executive. And the reason they have been able to do all they've been able to do in the last, 15 months, 350,000 Black women lost jobs in this country in the last year. DEI, I don't know the numbers for Black men and other people of color, but I know Black women took the hardest hit. And you saw Rachel Maddow go off the other night on MS Now, and I thought it was awesome
Yeah.
the way she broke down. There is an assault on Black people in this country. And
She
so,
did. It's also part of her podcast was first,
yes,
and then she did it on the show, and it is fascinating.
yeah, she
Everyone
went
should
there.
watch that. Yeah,
And to
yeah.
your point, to answer your question, though, the guardrails have failed. That's why this is working. The Congress just doesn't work anymore. Mike Johnson, as Speaker of the House, is just a rubber stamp, and he just doesn't call the Congress into session. So they don't check Trump on anything. The Supreme Court has been wishy-washy at best. They got the right decision on tariffs. They made a terrible decision on voting rights and on Roe, and they're going to do more damage. I actually think they're going to go for Loving versus Virginia and see if they cannot maybe spin that on its head and reverse the gains for same-sex marriage, etc. So I think that you're really looking at a rollback piece by piece. And if you read Project 2025, Don, it's all there. So the answer to your question is the reason I wrote the book and the reason people should read it is there is a path forward. And that path forward is us. And I dedicated this book to the next generation because they've got to get engaged and save this country and create the country that they want. You and I got another 20, 25, maybe plus years left to go,
You
and
better speak for yourself. I got another 50. I don't know what you're talking about.
but
Shit.
the reality is that they've got to get engaged. Listen, they can't afford new homes. They can't pay off their student loans. They will not have the same standard of living that we've had and that our parents had. And so the guardrails have failed. The only reason Trump has been allowed to succeed the way he has is because the Constitution is not working the way it was set up to work, Don. And that's not really something you and I can do anything about.
Okay.
And that's the problem.
Okay. All right. We're going to talk about this because, again, I am usually glass half full, but I'm just telling you, we're in a whole nother world right
We are.
now. And
We
that
are.
you and I can talk about. First, I'm going to roll the break, and I'm going to talk about how do we move forward. Is it a real possibility, especially when you see what's happening today, when they steal the vote, when they steal the judiciary, when they steal the executive branch, when they steal the legislative branch, and when we have a dictator that does what he wants at will. He can, start a war. He can give rich people tax cuts. He can, limit black people from voting. He can take away people's due process rights and just start arresting them. He can do unpatriotic
Well,
and
that's a failing of
unconstitutional
the
and
press
unlawful
corps,
things
isn't
like
it?
that. Yeah, and we need to talk about freedom of the press. First, a word
Yeah.
from our sponsors. Okay, we're back now with Sophia Nelson, award-winning journalist, best-selling author, constitutional commentator, attorney, professor, and founder and CEO of the Redefining Freedom Center of Virginia. I miss our banter that we used to have back in the day because you're one of those people. I have to tell you that I feel like after I've spoken to you, I'm smarter. You bring up the intelligence in the room, much like when I talk about Fareed Zakaria. I love having conversations with folks
Me
like that.
too.
So you understand what I'm saying about everything seems to be being taken away. And I've always said that, as you mentioned, comfort is poison. And we have to get into a place where we're not comfortable, where everyone has to be willing to sacrifice something. I can't tell you what that is, but for me, it is the freedom of speech, the freedom of the press, the First Amendment. That is my raison d'etre. That is where I can make the biggest difference because I have a platform to be able to make a difference in that venue. And so, how do we do this? And because you said we do it with us, but what is that sacrifice? What is that? What is the blueprint?
So, a few specifics. First, you have been someone, and I don't need to say this, everybody knows it. You have been a target of this administration. And you, I think, said something very important a couple weeks ago before the White House Correspondents' Dinner when you said, why are we supporting this? Why would we have a White House Correspondents' Dinner? And you boycotted it. It ended up not being one because of the shooter there. But we need to start with that pillar, the Bill of Rights. The First Amendment is what? Freedom of the press is in the First Amendment to the Constitution for a reason. Because without it working, without that constitutional tension of the press saying, wait, Mr. Executive, you're not allowed to do that. Wait, Mr. Executive, that violates the Emoluments Clause. Wait, Mr. Executive, that you can't put your face on the side of the Justice Building. We don't do that in the United States. Don, I've never seen anything like this, and I'm in my 50s. I remember working on the Hill when I was in my 20s, and I can't imagine a president of the United States being brazen enough to put his picture on the side of the Justice Department, put his face on passports, destroy the East Wing, and do all these things. So, the reason, again, we got here is because this man has been given a pass by the press. Let's call it what it is. They do not cover him the same way they covered past presidents. I don't have a reason for why that is. I don't know if it's fear. I don't know if he's got something on people or people just don't care or something more nefarious, which is, do you think President Obama could have done any of this and it would have not blown up and been major every day? I don't think so. So I think race is a factor. I think he's given a pass because he's this celebrity, rich mogul dude that was a great developer, supposedly, etc. and he's an entertainer, so they let him get away with saying unbelievable things. And I'm telling you right now, one of the reasons we are in trouble, as you say, and you're right, the press has failed in its job. It has not covered this man the way it should. The second thing, so the first thing is the press has got to start doing its job. That's the first thing. Secondly, the civic engagement and formation in this country has fallen off dramatically. We don't teach civics anymore. Most people, Don, don't even understand how the Constitution works, what the guardrails are, what are the functions of the executive versus the judiciary and the legislative. Most people don't know and they don't care. Those three words that open up the Constitution, we the people, are there for a reason. The No Kings protests, I think, have been effective, but I think we need more of them. And I think they need to be a lot bigger. And I think we need to be engaged in calling every member of Congress in those numbers that are in the millions, and we need to flood them because they respond to people calling. Because if they don't think they're going to get reelected, you will find them very engaged all of a sudden because that's what they care about. And so I think the third thing is that this next generation has to get engaged in a way that says, wait a minute, this is our country. We're going to inherit this. The debt ceiling, Don, is unbelievable. I don't know that we can ever get that squared away in the next 25 years or so. Maybe it's going to take 50 years. But again, if this apathy continues and people are more worried about their vacations or their nice homes or their cars or whatever they're worried about, and they continue to say, this doesn't affect me, this man will continue to do what he does, and it will get a hell of a lot worse before it gets better. So it's the press, it's the people, and it is the elected representatives who will save this country. Otherwise, it doesn't get saved. You're grimacing.
Man, well, I'm just saying there's a look, we're going to see a lot more of these. A lot more Tennessees, a lot more with Florida, a lot more Louisiana. That's going to happen all the way up until November because the Supreme Court gave them the green light to do it. It wasn't just they're not just proceeding on yellow. They're taking a green light and they're doing it and they're being successful with it.
Don, it'll be
Go
interesting to
ahead.
see what they do on voting right. I mean, I'm sorry, birthright citizenship. I'm actually now worried. I was convinced before that they would, based on their questions, not touch the 14th Amendment, but now I'm suspect. I'm not sure they don't do something with that and say, well, the 14th Amendment only applied to the enslaved persons of the time and their descendants, which means you and I might be maybe covered, but everybody else could be in trouble. So I'm not sure how they're going to try to skim that. But if you look at how the conservatives talk about it, they say, well, that doesn't apply to anybody else but enslaved people and their descendants. That's going to be how they might narrowly define that, and that's going to create a real problem.
Well, my thing is that I don't want to be Pollyannish about it, right? Because I had friends who said, you know what, after the election in 2024, they said, you know what, I got to figure out, I got to get out of here, I got to do that. I don't want to do that, but I kind of just shook it off, like, oh my God, they're being, a little bit dramatic. And as it turns out, they are not. They're not wrong.
They're not wrong.
So I don't want to be wrong and be overly, optimistic about what can happen in November. This has got to be bigger than Hungary in order to convince the MAGA and Trump faithful that the election wasn't somehow stolen.
Yeah, I don't really care about MAGA and Trump faithful. If you look at the numbers, they account for about 30%. The dangerous people in this country, and I'm going to call a thing, my white sister's got to get it together. 53% the first election, 51% the second election. By first, I mean 2016, and then the last election with Kamala Harris. And, I opened the book, Don, with Howard University the night of the election. I was there covering for Atlanta Journal-Constitution and Forbes. And I'm never going to forget that night. And you remember how it started out and then how it ended when Cedric came up and talked and was like, oh, everybody go home. We already knew it was over by then. But I remember thinking, and this has stuck with me, how could the country choose, whether you liked Kamala's laugh or whatever it was, or Hillary was this or that, they were competent. Donald Trump was literally talking about Hannibal Lecter and sharks. Literally. I'm not making this up. You can Google it.
And people
He had
eating dogs and cats.
he had no plan, no housing, no food prices, no affordability. He had nothing, and he just kind of rambled around, and he didn't sound coherent. He said Kamala was going to start a war with Iran. Hello, surprise. And so my point is, you've got to dig deeper down into there's an infection in America. It's a race infection, it's a gender infection, and it is still with us at 250 years. That's what I mean by not just celebrating, commemorating, reflecting, renewing, and redefining how we share in this country and how freedom is for everybody, not just for some people, because it's still just for some people.
Huh. That sounds like a book right there. Redefining freedom.
You're
That's
the
a book by
best.
Sophia Nelson, Redefining Freedom. Thank you, Sophia. It's
Thanks
good.
for having
It's
me,
been way
John.
too long. You got to come back.
I would
We'd
love
like to have
to.
you more
Thank you for
often.
what you do, and thank you for being a hero. You are. You may not think it, but you are. You're one of the people that they're going to talk about 50 years from now.
Are they going to say good stuff or bad? Who knows?
Good
But it
stuff.
doesn't matter.
Real good stuff. Good stuff. And you ain't gonna be here in 50 years, by the way. Neither am I.
You don't know. I've talked to some people. And they said
Tell you
they
what.
got pills out there. They got pills. Who would have thought that one day? Now listen to me, okay?
Okay, I'm
That
listening.
one day you'd be able to swallow a pill, and you could lose 50 pounds from taking that pill. When did you ever
Not
think
the
that?
same as dodging death. We all got a debt to pay on that one.
I
That's
don't
real.
know. I mean, I'm not saying I don't think anyone should be immortal. I mean, but we've got driverless cars. We're soon having flying cars. We have people. Look, when I see people now who are 60, 70, 80 years old, they don't look like the 60, 70, 80
That's
years old people
that's
when
true.
when we were younger. You know what I
I
mean?
agree. I agree. I
Yeah.
do. No, listen
Yeah.
though, seriously, thank you for what haven't had a chance. Of course, I was supportive as everybody was when they arrested you and did what they did, violated every right you had. You're standing up though, and that's a profound courage, and we need more of that from our mainstream press, and it just doesn't exist. It just doesn't. They're
No.
worried about their jobs and their money and their book deals.
Well, and I can understand that people worried about getting arrested, but who would have thunk? Unless, look, they can try to arrest all of us, but sooner or later, somebody's going to go, okay, enough already.
Right.
But I do believe I think you are absolutely correct that the media needs to have more of a backbone
It
and a
does.
lot less false equivalence and more challenging of the gatekeepers who are
And when
their
he calls a
bosses.
woman piggy or he says
Say
something
something.
vile, the men in the room should absolutely say, "Sir, that's inappropriate." And the women, they should all walk out. Remember, this is a person that feeds off of attention, negative, positive, whatever. And if you give him none and you shut it down, it stops because then nobody's reporting his antics.
Yeah,
They're not doing this right. They're doing this wrong.
yeah. Thank you, Sophia Nelson. We'll see you.
Thanks,
Have a good
Don.
one, okay? Be well.